Hello, friends. I'm Tamara with Love in a Big World, and this is our LBW Educate You podcast. And today, my guest is Margaret Boersma, all the way from Canada. And we are talking about how you can empower yourself to inspire your students. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And will you please share a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Okay, so I was a teacher specializing in kindergarten to 8th grade. And since I stopped teaching, I did that for over 30 years, I became an entrepreneur because I felt like I wanted to really help teachers and support them with helping their students. And so as an entrepreneur, I am now an educational consultant and a teacher trainer.
That's awesome. So today we're going to be digging into the ideas of how we can keep ourselves empowered in order to best connect and inspire our students. And I know from the students, teachers, administrators that I've been talking to, everyone is really tired after a year or more of this pandemic. Looking forward to a break in the summertime, but at the same time, kind of weary about the idea of what the fall may look like. So, what tips do you have to share with us? And I guess the best place to start is really with us with an assessment of what our student needs are.
Sure. So I have this little assessment that I invite your listeners to just take a mental note of. You don't need a pencil or paper or anything like that. And then I'll talk about 3 specific strategies that will really support you with self-care, mindset, and problem solving. Okay, so here it comes. So I have 4 different states on what I call the learning potential scale. What is the learning potential of the students in your class? And this is based on your relationship with the goals for your students and the attention for your students, and their relationship to the goals and intentions, and if they match or if they don't. So it kind of goes in that direction, but it'll become more clear. So the first state is a state that I call dysfunction. And dysfunction means there's very low potential for learning. And by that, I mean optimal learning. You know you're in this state when your students do not participate in discussion, even with prompting. They distract others, they interrupt and disrupt the learning. They oppose ideas and elude responsibility in group work. They avoid apologizing and struggle to empathize, really. They tease and bully, lashing out when angry or frustrated, or they withdraw completely. And you, as the teacher, have little time to support individual students. You do not see real impact for your efforts, and you often feel exhausted and at a loss as to how to improve the situation. So basically, in the state of dysfunction, you're pulling the class along, and there's an atmosphere of emotional distrust. The second state is a state I call struggle. Struggle means there is some potential for learning. You know you're in this state when your students get their work done, but often need redirection to use their time wisely. They are intentional in giving their attention to instruction, but they're easily distracted. In this state, students have difficulty controlling their impulses, like they might interrupt a lot, and they struggle to express themselves through writing. And they need you to problem solve relational issues. So you, as the teacher, have very little time to support individual students. You're hopeful that all your efforts will have a greater impact. You're depleted of energy and desperately want more support for your class. So basically, work is getting done in this struggle state, but often to minimum standards. And you're very involved in relational problem solving, especially with group work. The third state is a state I call traction. Traction means there is a mediocre potential for learning. You know you're in this state when your students work well when confined to an assigned seating plan, pay attention and seem to value the learning, completing most assignments, though often to minimum standards. They merely tolerate input from others and prefer to work on their own or with the same friend all the time. The same few students respond to questions and carry discussions. And you as a teacher have some time to support individual students and are making some impact, but still have very little energy left at the end of the day. You view the situation as just tolerable. So basically, with a lot of structures in place, most of your students are progressing. Then there's actually a big gap. You have the first three states, and then you have the most optimal state, which I'll tell you about, but there's a huge gap in between. The final state is a state I call thriving. Thriving means there is full potential for learning. You know you are in this state when your students display an openness to new ideas, are curious and excited about their learning, even talking about it during their breaks. They follow a thread of conversation and ask follow-up questions while respectfully probing for more information. They continuously make connections to real life as they integrate their learning. Your students nurture relationships while developing their strengths and passions and are motivated to make a difference for others. They constantly set goals, seek feedback, and self-assess. And you as a teacher have time and energy to address needs. You see yourself as a facilitator or a guide on the side most of the time. You're energized and thrilled with your impact on student progress. So basically, your students have a high level of participation, are discovering their strengths and building on them while nurturing their own relationships and seeking to make a difference to others in the world. So those are the four states. So as listeners, I'm wondering if you found yourself in one of those states. I know that most teachers find themselves in one of the bottom three states. And I also know that most teachers want to be in the optimal state. And that's what I do. I help you to get to a state of thriving. And today I can't wait to share three practical strategies to start you off.
Oh, Margaret, thank you. As you were talking about those different states, I was picturing different classrooms and interactions with students and just imagining that there's so many of our listeners who can relate to what you were describing.
Yeah.
So if someone finds themselves in dysfunction or struggle or traction, what can be done to calm down students who may be acting out?
Okay, so one thing that can be done is to realize that as human beings, not just the students, but adults as well, they have their own perspective. And our perspective is our truth. So when we want to calm somebody down, there's a simple little script that you can even teach your students to help one student calm another student down. So I'll just give you a little example, okay? Because oftentimes the reason we're upset is because we don't think that someone understands us. So what we want to do is we really want to get behind the lenses of the other person and help them to know that we understand them. But in our own mindset, we need to be willing to take our lenses off, our colored glasses. We all have colored glasses that we go through life with, and we don't realize it. The longer we wear our colored lenses, the less we realize we're actually looking at the world through a colored lens or a perspective. And in order to calm someone down or de-escalate conflict, we need to be willing to take those lenses off and get behind the lenses or the perspective of the other person. And we can do that. I'll give you an example, and then we'll do that using a script. So imagine that in your classroom, Mary cries loudly when she's frustrated. And I know that there's a lot more anxiety exhibited in children now during the pandemic because their whole lives have been uprooted. And not that ours haven't, but I think with parents and us, we're carrying our own extra burdens because of the uncertainty and the conditions that we need to make things work. And so our anxiety levels are higher than usual. So these tools I'm giving you are critical right now. So Mary cries loudly when frustrated. She's easily frustrated lately. What you could say to Mary is, I understand that you have something to say about what we're talking about. And then you can say, it really hurts when you feel totally ignored right now. And Mary may come down a little bit. So if you imagine the emotional temperature in any of us could be anywhere between 0 and 10 for anything. So anger, same thing, between 0 and 10. So in Mary's case, it's frustration, between 0 and 10. And maybe she felt ignored in the class discussion. And so her frustration level peaked, and it happens in an instant. It's not usually a gradual thing. So in an instant, she might be at a 9 or a 10. And you notice that as a teacher, and you need to calm her down. So you get behind her lenses and you say, I understand, and paraphrase what it is that she is experiencing. All right. So that's why I said, I understand you have something to say right now on the topic. And you also have to say how they might be feeling in that moment. Those two are critical. So it really hurts when you feel totally ignored, like right now. Okay, for example. And if that doesn't help, Mary says, yes, and then you have to do it again. You have to paraphrase what she's saying and how she's feeling until that emotional temperature drops. So watch for that. You could also add, when you're a little more advanced, you could say something like what she's concerned about or what she's committed to. So you might say, you're concerned that you don't count in this class. And I mean, when you speak to someone like that, they do calm down because they feel that they finally understood. And that's all we really want as human beings. We want to be understood. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, it's only when both people's emotional temperature is back to calm that we can do any kind of problem solving. So like I said, it may require another round, but that's okay as long as you can get the emotional temperature down. So then once they're down, then you can say to Mary, what were you thinking? And I would do this in private, not with the class there. What were you thinking just before you blurted out in frustration? And that will make her be able to think. But if she's activated or in a state of feeling triggered or activated, it won't help to say, and we do this all the time as teachers, why did you do that? Why did you blurt out? Why did you hit Tommy? Why did you? And kids can't answer that because their amygdala is triggered. And so their amygdala is their fight, flight, or freeze survival part of the brain. And they can't access their thinking part and their problem solving part and their judging part, which is the frontal cortex. So the question to ask is, what were you thinking just before you started crying? Okay. And this is a reflective exercise. And it helps her identify the thought that she had just before she flew off the handle or started crying in this case. So this type of problem solving is needed a number of times often before Mary will be able to access or assess her learning when activated. So after she has those conversations a number of times, then the hope is that gradually when she does get triggered again, then she'll be able to realize, oh, that's a thought I had. No, I don't want to go there, and choose consciously something different. Mm. As human beings, we don't consciously choose unless we go through that kind of reflective exercise. So that's one of the strategies I have for you.
Oh, that's really helpful. And again, as you were talking, I was thinking about attachment theory and how when kids get triggered, it is because they feel ignored or alone or overlooked. And they need to know that we, as the adults who care for them, are a safe place. And we have the power to help them de-escalate, as you were beautifully explaining. But so often we get triggered ourselves.
Exactly.
And instead of deflating the anger or frustration, we almost cause it to explode more.
Yeah, we inflame it, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's important for us to take a step back and hear what you were explaining and to understand the neuroscience behind it as well. Mm-hmm. It's not just because kids are trying to be bad.
No.
There's a physical reaction taking place where they can't think through what's happening at the moment until they fall again.
Exactly. And we talk about kids making poor choices, but often those choices are made in a moment of being triggered or activated. So I don't know which word is more familiar to your audience. I like the word activated because it doesn't remind me of guns. But so when children are activated like that, they need to understand in a moment of calm what makes them activated. And I mean, if you ask any adult, what are your triggers or what activates you, most people wouldn't be able to say. And this is yet what we're trying to teach our students so they don't flare up in the middle of our class. So we need to be able to grasp that ourselves. And that requires some practice. It really does. Yeah.
Absolutely. So in thinking about that, you know, one of the conversations that I'm having on a regular basis with folks is that not only do we need to help kids develop their own capacity for SEL and emotional regulation, but we as adults, as you just mentioned, have to develop our own capacity.
Yeah.
So what are some strategies that allow us as adults to be empowered and strong and creative?
All right, I'm going to give you a brilliant one. At least I really like it. Take some wrapping your mind around it, but I think it'll be great for teachers too. So here it is. Most of us think that if we have something like money, we'll be able to do something like go on a vacation, and then we will be something. We will be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, it does not work like that. So I'll tell you that the old way of thinking is have, do, be. First we have something, then we are able to do something, and then we will able to feel something, be something, okay? Mm-hmm. So that would be like, if I were smart, I could pass my test and be happy. Mm. In reality, it's flipped. The way it really works, and we need to get this because this is how we can help ourselves and our colleagues too, is be first, then do, then you'll have.
Okay, tell us more.
Yeah, so so if you're going to be something, then like I have here, if a kid says is scared of a test, okay, and they say to themselves, I am smart. That's a way of being. So I'm already smart. What would a smart person do? Well, a smart person would study for the test. And you can get into detail about that. What's the best way to study for the test? And because they're smart, they will be creative about their to-do list. If they already think of themselves as losers, they don't have that ability to create what they need to do. And they often don't act on what they even know to do, leaving them with a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the way to do it is be first. I am smart. I can study. I have a great report card, for example. So the have is at the end, not at the first. So instead of, if the government would have, okay, that's the have, then I could spend time bonding with my students or whatever the do is, and feel satisfied with my success with my students. But that's backwards. So I already am feeling satisfied and happy with my students, just the way they are and just the way they aren't, just the way the teaching situation is and the way it isn't right now. And so because I'm already being that, I'm able to think of ways to make my to-do list. So because I'm being happy, I can bond with my students. I find ways of bonding with my students, even though I'm not teaching them in person half the time or all the time. And then you have a satisfied feeling with your success. That's the have. Mm-hmm. So often it's only when we are already in a positive state of mind or a positive state of being that new ideas can come to us, like how to bond with our students when we're teaching virtually. We might not be able to think of that if we weren't already in a positive frame of mind. So this be, do, have is a way of getting yourself in a positive frame of mind so that you can actually be more productive and make a bigger impact.
That's so powerful. And I'm thinking through just some of the struggles that I'm facing in my own life, going, okay, so how do I flip that so that I can be and do and have? That's really helpful.
You want a personal example? Because
Yes,
honestly,
please. Personal is awesome.
sometimes, okay. So sometimes people, when I do professional development training for teachers, they don't always appreciate it when I go out of the professional examples. But this really is all about who we are as human beings too. So this
Absolutely.
little example, I have permission to share this from my husband, and it involves me. So he loves sailing, and he's always got these little tiny boats. They're called lasers, and there's only room for one person on them. And he thought, wouldn't it be great if we went on a family holiday, and for a week we chartered a boat, like a big boat that you can take for a whole week, overnight too. So he looked it up online, and he found out that they cost an astronomical amount of money just for 1 week, like $4,000. And he goes, oh my goodness, we'll never be able to do that. And he, in the moment, he was taking a success seminar, and he was learning the be, do, have. And he wanted to be successful. So he asked himself, what would a successful person do in this situation? Now, every winter he goes to a boat show, and there's these gorgeous big boats set up in this huge arena. And so he went to the boat show, and he walked all over these different kinds of boats, and he talked to the people selling them. And of course they cost big bucks. But then he noticed right next to where they were selling them, when there was a little booth, and it was the Canadian Yacht Charters, and they rent boats. And he went to them and he said, what kind of boat would you need in your fleet so that it could be rented every week in the hottest weather? And he said, that one. We have one other boat in the fleet like that, and it's rented every week. So then he did a whole bunch of other homework before he called me from the boat show. And he said, Margaret, I'm thinking of buying a boat. And I'm like, no, do you realize you have to spend every weekend maintaining that thing, and how much it costs to buy a slip at the harbor? And I had all these questions, and he was able to answer every one of them because he had already done his homework, because that's what a successful person did, and he knew it. So then the next step was for me to go down to the boat show. And we walked all around this one boat. It has 3 little bedrooms in it, holds 6 people. It's gorgeous. Got an upstairs, downstairs, and we bought it. And we never thought we could ever do something like that. But it worked out because he had this attitude, and it was totally not him to do that. But because he got the idea that you have to be first, and then you can think of creative ways to do, and then you can have. And so he did it, and he just followed the steps that he knew he had to do, and he maintained that mindset. And that's what did it. And he thanked those seminar leaders later, saying, this would never have happened if I didn't learn the be, do, have.
And so I'm so curious now, do you rent out the boat to other people too?
We have it. Yeah, thank you. We have it in the beginning and the end of the summer season. And it's in the charter program where they look after it completely, and they rent it every week in the summer season. And so we get it a little bit in the shoulder season.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, this is so inspiring. Okay, so now I'm curious, this mindset, it's really powerful, and it's extremely applicable to where I am right now in my own personal life, and professionally. But what about the nurturing part? I mean, like, how do we continue? Because that takes a lot of resolve to continually think about be, do, have.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that could get a bit tiring. So how do we nurture ourselves along the way? And how do we nurture our students along the way when we get weary?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is something that we can do. Just like we eat food every day to nurture and nourish our bodies, and hopefully we eat healthy food so that we feel at our optimal. We can do that with a couple of very simple strategies, but unless you really do it, you don't know the benefits. So one is gratitude. So being grateful for what we have. Like, I'm grateful that I'm living here with my husband, even though I can't see my friends, and I can think of all kinds of things I'm not grateful for, but I don't focus on those. I focus on, hey, my husband let me air out while we were walking. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that it's getting summer here and the leaves are coming on the trees. I'm grateful for the beautiful flowers and the reminder that there's a creative force behind life and the new life we see in the spring. I'm grateful for being able to wake up healthy in the morning, because we're not all able to. I'm grateful for so much. And I think if we write down, I'm a person of prayer, so I'm constantly saying my gratefulness. But if you're not, you might want to write it down. Journaling is really, really beneficial. So even, write down a few things you're grateful for at night, or write down what you're grateful for in the morning, or what you're anticipating in the morning. I'm anticipating, a lovely walk through the woods where I'm going to discover new ideas without trying. So for example, and then you act on that, and later in the day, and like at night before you go to bed, you can write down, I am grateful because this is an insight I got on my walk. So you're setting yourself up in the morning with your 3 things, and then you're reflecting on them at night with an attitude of gratitude. And it might not happen the way you had hoped it would. Maybe there was something that took a twist, an unexpected twist. And what are you grateful for in that? Because sometimes we have to look for what we're grateful for. But when you get that, it's like developing a muscle. You develop that muscle by doing it continuously. Habits get started soon after 6 weeks of daily practice. But then your mindset shifts because it's in the habit of being grateful. And the things around you often haven't changed. But you've changed inside because you've nurtured yourself through an attitude of gratitude.
That's great. And how does that practice of gratitude work with our students?
I think we need to nurture the same practice with our students. I think we need to be very conscious of when our students are speaking negatively. What I try and teach people, and I would teach this to my students too, is when you're feeling upset about something, often you do have to clear with someone. I call it, you can call it clearing, but it's like getting it out. And like when my mother wasn't doing well a couple of years before she died, I remember I needed an hour or two just to talk to one person who heard me. And she did that first strategy I talked about. So what I'm hearing you say is, and it sounds like it sucks right now, and whatever it was, yes, and then there's this. And so we had this back and forth, but I got it all out. And what I teach my students too is 1 or 2 people max. Don't say the negative more than that, because what you're doing is flexing that muscle and you're remembering the negative. And every time you bring it up to yourself, even in your thought life, it's just going to reinforce that. And that attitude of gratitude is going to sink to the bottom. And you're going to be disempowered as you go through your day. And what we want is to be empowered as we go through our day.
Right. That's so good. Margaret, these are such practical tips. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It has been empowering for me. And I think that this is going to inspire me to help my kids and those that I work with. So closing thoughts before we go.
Okay, closing thoughts. I would say that most of us as educators do not know how to make it, the social emotional learning education, practical, step by step. And that's what kids need. That's how they learn numeracy and literacy. That's how they need to learn SEL. And the other thing, it doesn't go deep enough. Often we are very reactive. We look at a behavior and we respond. We need to be proactive. Teach your kids these tools. Remind them often of these tools. Role play it with them so they get practice. And do it yourself with a colleague at home or in the staff room. because it's something that's new to all of us. It's not just your students it's new to, it's us as well. So be gracious with yourself, give yourself some slack, but make it proactive. And I can help with that. I have, people can reach out to me. I have a lot of free materials that I can help them with. I actually have like a 5 or 6 little 20-minute videos for children where I teach social emotional learning using Castle's framework, actually.
Okay.
And I teach it through video. So it's all through the arts. So it's really fun, like trying to learn to identify emotions and how to manage emotions and how do you see something from another perspective. And I wear funny glasses from the dollar store to teach them that lesson. And, you know, growth mindset, how do you instill that in your students in a proactive way, not when it's too late or somebody has gone off the handle for the umpteenth time. Like that's what's really important. So I have some free programs and I have a paid program that's also 9 weeks I love to do with a whole staff, school staff. And then I can do a similar one with parents. So we have the children in there, we have the staff in there, we have the parents in there, and the culture changes. And it's really the way to go.
So how can people get in touch with you?
I have a website called creativeeducationinaction.com. And there's a contact sheet there.
Great. Well, Margaret, thank you for spending some time with us. And friends, thank you for tuning in to this episode of LBW Educate You. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.